Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Nightmares Nightly. I go all out on Halloween. Every year in mid-September, I scout the decorations of every superstore and annual spooky shop alike in search of the latest and greatest decorations for the holiday season. I spend weeks transforming my house into an icon for Halloween, so people from all over town and even the town over can drive down the block with their families, eyes wide at my collection of decorations. Lights, inflatables, fog, and creepy music. There's an abandoned house on my street, and a few others don't decorate, so I like to go the extra mile. We set up a security camera on the doorstep to document all of the costumes and call out the best on social media. It's a hit every year. I've seen masks, makeup, and costumes of all kinds. However, I saw something last night that makes me question if I'll ever decorate my house again. We were in the final throes of trick-or-treating. There was only a handful of kids left, the crowds drifting away. My husband and daughter had returned from their own route while I passed out candy. They were now sorting through her haul on the living room floor. I was trying to empty my bowl so I could end the night. I could see the last two kids down the road, the only ones that hadn't come to my house yet. Two animatronics walking together, followed by a skeleton teenager who looked too old to be going door to door. After awing at my spectacle, they came my way, pointing at my hanging skeletons and creepy window decals. They held out their bags with toothy grins, and I loaded the kids up with everything I had. I reminded them to avoid all fresh food and open packages, and pointed to the camera so they could pose. They thanked me and skipped away, with the teenager saying something rude as they passed. When the skeleton teenager arrived, I showed him my empty bowl, and he said some words I'd rather not say, so I shrugged them off. "Better luck next year," I said, and he followed the boys, after giving me the finger. As they left, I saw a figure across the street, standing in the artificial fog. It looked like a kid in a fuzzy costume, although what exactly I couldn't see. I smiled and waved them over, pulling an unopened bag from behind the door. They just stood there for a while, and I coaxed them over by opening the bag. They shivered and crossed the street, other kids paying them no mind. They moved slowly, creeping inches at a time. I couldn't tell who the costume was concealing, but I was patient with them. It looked like there was something wrong with their legs the way they shuffled, and the mask made them look straight ahead. When I got a better look at what they were wearing, I was impressed and unsettled at the same time. The kid was dressed as a sheepdog, but the costume looked very old. It was dirty, but I couldn't deny how good it looked otherwise, like it had been pulled straight from the TV set in the 90s. "Oh my gosh, I love your costume. Did your parents get that for you?" I asked, motioning for them to come closer. I had a handful of candy ready for them. The sheepdog stood frozen. They just stared. "What are you supposed to be this year, A puppy?" I asked cheerfully, keeping the awkwardness at bay. They were looking past me, inside the house. I shook the handful of candy to get their attention. "Don't say much, do you? That's all right. Happy Halloween," I said. They stayed put, but held out a crumpled paper bag. I brought it to them, unsure if there was a disability of some sort that I couldn't see. Closer now, I could see the dirt in the fur of the costume, and there was a smell, an awful, piercing stench. I pushed it off, thinking maybe the kid was going through a tough time at home. As I filled the kid's bag, I looked into their eyes, which were now very sharp and staring up at me. "Are you alone?" they said, but the voice wasn't like a child's. It was deep and raspy, like an old man. I jumped, but tried to play it off. "What's that, hun?" I said, leaning closer. Goosebumps covered my skin. "Who's in there?" they said, their deep groan of a voice giving me chills. Their large eyes looked past me again, then back up at me. This was a prank. It had to be. But the way it talked, the way it wheezed, it was too real to replicate. "Excuse me?" I stiffened and backed away, blocking their view. Behind the mask, around the eyes, it was dark red, like there was no skin. "Are you scared?" they asked. I called for my husband. "You should be going," I said. Down the road, I saw porch lights go out. I decided it was time to do the same. "Why? I'll have to come back." There was a beastly groan behind the mask. Have a good night." I shut the door and killed the light. I waited a moment before looking out. The sheepdog was nowhere to be seen. My husband walked up, mouth full of candy, asking what I wanted. I went to explain, but shrugged and brushed it off. The next morning, I checked the tapes. Everything was fine until the sheepdog kid. It was all distorted and grainy, barely able to make out my altercation with them. But as the night went on after I went inside, the kid blinked in and out of view hourly through the night. Every time they would just stand there silently, eyes locked on the camera for minutes at a time. And I can still smell the rot on the front porch. Thanks for listening, everybody. And if you like what I'm doing and want to hear more, hit that subscribe button for more Nightmares Nightly.